On the afternoon of September 10th, 2001, Dr. Sneha Philip leaves her apartment near New York's World Trade Center and never returns. Frantically searching for her in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, her family is left with few clues as to what happened to her after she left her apartment. In the beginning, they believe that something happened to her the night before the attacks. With systems overwhelmed, they can't get anyone to listen. This is the first part of her story.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Amy.
And you're listening to She Goes by Jane. At the end of this episode and every episode, we will be joined by a special guest who will read an original poem by Amy Baker about the women we're featuring. This week, we are joined by Sakina Jaffrey.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Amy.
So, Vanessa, I messaged you last night to say that I thought this was a two-parter.
Yeah, you've been writing so many words.
So many words. So just for our audience, as a forewarning, this is a two-parter, which we do not do frequently, but thought it was necessary. I thought it was necessary for this one because Vanessa has no idea what we're talking about.
No.
Yeah, and you
I never know what we're talking about. There's been a few times where we're talking about something that we've covered in our documentary She, and then I know. But the rest of the time, Amy keeps this complete secret.
Yes. Sometimes I post a little bit about when I'm researching, so you might have a hint, but
You've even put posts up on Facebook that said, Vanessa, don't read this.
I have, yes. And I'm on Facebook because I'm an elder millennial, and that's where we still live. As a forewarning, we are going to be talking about 9/11 today. I am going to try to get through this without crying because I just have this immediate emotional reaction to topics about 9/11. And so I also know our listeners, particularly listeners from New York City, might have similar feelings as well. So Vanessa, have you ever been asked where you were on 9/11?
No, I've never been asked. But I was preparing for my 8-year-old niece's birthday party. So I was in my guest bedroom, wrapping her gifts and watching TV when everything switched over to the news. And we lived I was living in Canada at the time. That's where I grew up. So I think that's probably why no one's really asked me where I was. But my mom was crossing the border that day to get some food for my niece's birthday party. Because that's the thing. So we lived in a really small little country town in Canada along the border. And so we would go across the border to where there was a town that was slightly bigger than ours and had the bigger grocery store. Right. So she was over getting some food for the party. And when she came back through, there was commotion at the border. And she did not know what was happening because she hadn't been hearing any of that. She'd just been out grocery shopping. And then she got back, and right after that, they actually closed the border down.
I didn't know that they...
Yeah, it was closed for a day or two where they actually completely shut down the border just for security reasons. I don't blame them. Right. They had enough going on. Do they need to also worry about the borders at the same time? But yeah, so we were all just happy that my mom made it back to that side before anything made it really difficult for her to come home. And then we were stranded with our tiny grocery store for a couple of days, which was not a big deal.
Right, yeah.
Considering.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it as well because I was thinking about how my memory of it is different than what must have actually happened.
Yeah. Memory has a way of doing that.
Yeah, memory is so slippery. I know I was in an early morning class on medieval literature, and I would be exceptionally certain of this, except I recently spoke to the professor I had class with, and he said he never taught a class at 8 a.m.
Really?
Yeah, so I was like, am I wrong in my memory? I can't wrap my head around that at all.
So it was at 8 a.m. I mean, even thinking about that, would I have been up and wrapping gifts at 8 a.m.?
Would you?
I don't know. So now you've got me questioning my memory.
Yeah, so,
Did we not? Was there a delay in the news?
There was not.
There was not a
delay because I do know that this was 2001, so cell phones weren't ubiquitous yet, right? So no one in the class, I remember this, no one knew what was happening, but I do remember leaving class and a friend was leaving our dorm on the way to his class, and he said a plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. And so I remember that very clearly, and I'm pretty
Right.
certain of that one
And I
memory.
do remember the interruption in the television show I was watching. So
Yeah,
I think I was watching one of those morning like programs, but I don't
right.
remember which one. I just know that it was interrupted and I was like, this seems fake.
Right. And
It was confusing.
I remember thinking that when my friends said this, I remember picturing like a small propeller plane.
Mm-hmm.
And in my memory, I remember thinking this because there'd been a recent small plane crash into a building, but in getting ready for today, I couldn't find information on that.
Really?
Yeah, I do know that there was one in 2002 at the Bank of America Tower in Tampa, so like the next year. I was a teenager who flew a Cessna into a building because he, quote unquote, was inspired by 9/11.
Oh.
So I'm wondering if I just conflated those two memories.
I mean, it's possible. Like we said, memory is very, it's like, it's an odd thing, right?
Right. And I also remember walking into my dorm building and onto our floor, and I lived on this floor with all my college friends. And I remember all the doors being opened and everyone was in front of their TVs. And I also remember it was like so silent. Nobody was saying anything. They were just looking at their little tiny dorm room
Mm-hmm.
TVs, right? I know that I would have arrived just after the Pentagon was hit, but I always thought it had been earlier that I got there, that I'd gotten there before the second plane. And now I like time wise that like doesn't make sense. So yeah.
But I mean, we've talked about this before, how memory is like it's like an unrecorded, intangible thing. So it's very hard to like completely, like it's almost like you're comparing your memories to actual facts that happened that day, but also to other people's memories of it. And all
Exactly.
of it is just going to keep morphing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was sort of like reassured because I read Dr. Robert Shaler's account. He was the chief medical examiner for New York City at the time. He said he was in a meeting that morning when a staff member from the lab knocked on the door and said a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And like me, he also assumed that this was a small plane. So
Mm-hmm.
I was not alone in thinking that. And he was thinking, oh, like we're going to have to set up a temporary morgue. So they were preparing for disaster. But I guess by the time Dr. Shaler got down the stairs, they realized it was bigger. It was an airliner. And so like in this, not all of our listeners are from America,
Right.
right? Like we have, you know, global listeners, but I think for Americans in particular watching those attacks, it was like hard enough to comprehend what was happening, let alone what would that mean later that day or the next, or even now, like 23 years later. And Dr. Shaler, though, he had some clues. He said that as soon as he realized that there was fire in the buildings, that there would be bodies, and then it would be his office's job to identify them. And as soon as the towers fell, he knew at least somewhat what those numbers would be like. So, in getting ready to cover today's story, I was revisiting what I know about 9/11, both in terms of what I thought I knew and what I never heard. To orientate us in this story, we have to go back to that day. As the towers fell, and in the many hours that followed, hundreds of thousands of people fled lower Manhattan. Or if they lived elsewhere, sometimes they got stuck and spent the night sleeping on the streets. And this is 12, 13, 14 or more hours after. And even if you lived in lower Manhattan, electricity was out for places. So a lot of people couldn't get into their buildings. And not everyone had cell phones. And even if you did, cell phone service wasn't a guarantee. So it was really just like mass chaos there. This does mean that people lost track of one another. There are different reports on this number, but some say that in those early hours and days, around 9,000 people were initially reported missing. A makeshift plywood 200-foot long wall outside Bellevue Hospital, which became known as the Wall of Prayer, was plastered with missing persons flyers by people looking for their loved ones.
Well, I'm just thinking that some of our listeners might not have even been alive when this happened.
A good number. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking like everybody kind of knows what this feels like,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a bunch that don't. But I was thinking also that the only thing in their lifetime that would be comparable and in a very different realm of things would be like the way we felt when the pandemic first set in. Like that feeling of like the world being completely turned upside down and not knowing what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So I think like our younger listeners would have to like compare that moment
Mm-hmm.
to this, but also know that like it's a different feeling because with the pandemic, nobody was clearly attacking us.
Right.
With
Yeah.
that, there was harm meant. So
Yes.
it's just like
Yeah, and sort of like
having.
I think like what my experience of having students over the course of my time teaching, like I had students who lived in New York City who had family members who unfortunately passed away during 9/11 or were impacted by it. And then over time, like seeing students arrive who think of this like it's like a historic event that never happened in their lifetime.
Right.
It's such a like huge shift in like understanding or
That's what I'm thinking. It's almost
processing.
like how we think of like World War II.
Right.
Like it's something that did not happen in our lifetime. We can't understand the magnitude of that or what that felt like. So it's just like trying to put it into perspective of like, you know, how I mean, like you said, mostly, you know, it affected obviously Americans, but I think the whole world kind of shut down and had their eyes on New York City at that moment. Like that
Yeah. I
happened.
mean,
Like
you know,
being in Canada, I know it affected us greatly. I mean, it's kind of like when there was like some terrorist attacks on Paris.
mhm.
Also, like we all were impacted by that. And it's something that's American, but I think everybody can relate. Like all of our listeners can understand like that feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's like a particular American viewpoint of 9/11 and what happened and because I also remember like on the year anniversary being in Italy and like we were at an American satellite university and but there was like no recognition of the day.
Oh, really? Okay.
I just remember people being like, "Wait, what?" And it's just like, well, like for Italians, like there's not that same sense of feeling that you're having as an American. That was like a moment where I was like, "Oh."
So maybe we took note of those attacks happening in like Paris and
Yeah, but
around
like
London
but we're not
because we had it happen to us first.
maybe or like, you know, we might not be memorializing or thinking about those attacks in the same way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But, you know, in the time that it happened, people in America handled this in various ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly if you were able to have some distance from New York City. I know I couldn't turn off the news. Well, my roommate just didn't want to see those images at all.
Well, it's a different way of coping too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's hard for some people, and some people need to stay completely informed.
And so, like, given the intensity with which I was watching the news coverage, it is highly likely that I saw a reporter talk to a man named Jonathan Philip. And watching that coverage now, the camera, like, it pulls up really close to his face, and he's talking about his missing sister, a 31-year-old doctor. And behind him, you can see a woman holding a photocopy of a flyer with his sister's image on it. And John says to the reporter, I was on the phone with her and she told me she couldn't leave because there were people who were hurt. And selfishly, I told her, come on, you know, leave the building. And she said, no, I have to help this person over here. And that's the last thing I heard from her. There was one problem with his statement, though. It was a lie.
So I'm guessing this is the woman we're going to be talking about over the next 2 episodes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Wait, so can you explain to me what part of that was a lie? He didn't actually talk to her then, is what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. He did not speak to her on the phone. Now, she was missing.
Right.
But the whole phone call is fabricated.
Okay.
Okay.
So do we know why he made this lie up?
Yeah, so to tell that part of the story, I kind of have to go back a little bit. It's really impossible to tell what might have happened with Sneha's story, which that's her name, without this lie. Sneha was a 31-year-old doctor, and she was last seen on September 10th. Sneha and her husband, Ron, who was also a doctor, lived just 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center. Ron had last seen her at their apartment on the morning of September 10th before he headed to work at around 11 a.m. That night, Ron got home from his shift at Jacobi Medical Center in the Bronx at around midnight, and she still wasn't home.
So she went missing before 9/11 even happened?
Yes. So the last time she's spotted is on September 10th.
Okay, give me a minute. So her brother said that she was in one of those buildings?
Mm-hmm.
And that she called from the building saying she couldn't leave because people were hurt.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying she basically sacrificed herself.
Yes.
In the building.
Yes.
But really, she's been missing since before this even happened.
Exactly.
Okay. Just so I know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So where we are, Ron, her husband, has been at work and he comes home. She's not there. Okay. September 10th at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not unusual for Sneha to stay out at night. She often wouldn't check in with Ron while she was out either. Remember, this was before cell phones were everywhere. Like before Life 360, we weren't tracking people on their phones. So checking in or knowing someone's whereabouts constantly wasn't necessarily as strange as it would seem now. But Ron later did say that he did want her to communicate this information with him more regularly.
I feel like all the stories we talk about are the reasons why we stay so connected now with cell phones and Life 360.
Yes. So we can track people and know where they are, right?
Yes.
He says that on that night, so September 10th, he thought that she might be with her cousin or possibly spending the night at her brother John's apartment. Sneha and John had been arguing, and Ron hoped that she was there, kind of patching things up with him. In any case, when he woke up the next morning, she still wasn't there. On nights that she spent out, he says that she usually got home between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. The morning of September 11th, Sneha had the day off, but Ron needed to be at Jacobi early for a meeting, so missing her return was not unexpected. He woke up early around 6:30 a.m., got ready for work, and went to the Bowling Green station and arrived at an 8 a.m. meeting.
Okay, so now you said she was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And where did she work?
So she was working at that time at St. Vincent's.
Okay, so how close is that to the site where I live?
So St. Vincent's is in Staten Island. So
okay, so
like a ferry ride away.
So she wouldn't have even been, but this is her day off.
This is her day off.
But if it was a work day, she wouldn't have even been near it.
Right.
Okay, I'm just putting everything, I'm putting a map together.
Putting a map, okay. We're mapping New York City.
Yes.
And space and time, right?
Yes.
We'll be back in a moment. We know that American Airlines Flight 11 left Boston Logan at 7:59 a.m. and hits the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. At this point, Ron was likely still in his meeting. United Airlines Flight 175 left Boston at 8:14 and hit the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. Like many medical facilities across the city, Jacobi in the Bronx braced for potential flood of patients. This never happened. Those who did need care ended up being taken to places like New York Presbyterian or over to St. Vincent's. But a lot of medical staff who were in the city that day talk about what was upsetting that day as they stood by is that, for the most part, no patients were coming. They say that's how they knew how bad the attack was. While he was waiting, though, Ron kept on calling their apartment phone, but no one was picking up. Eventually, around 3 p.m., he asked his supervisor if he could leave. Without the influx of patients that they were expecting, his request was granted, and he caught a ride on an ambulance heading into Lower Manhattan. It would take them 6 hours to get down to Tribeca. By then, he had to get out and walk the rest of the way. Even though things were blocked off, he was wearing his scrubs still and was able to convince the police to let him through. When he did, he went to his apartment at 225 Rector Place in Battery Park. This is literally around the corner from the World Trade Center buildings, at most a 6 or 7 minute walk. He's unable to get inside his building because the electricity is cut off to the doors and they won't open. So he signals to someone in an apartment and asks them to knock on his door to see if Sneha answers. She doesn't. From there, Ron goes to the World Trade Center site and then makes it to a friend's apartment in the West Village where he ends up spending the night on the couch. During this time, he's also spoken to Sneha's family and they haven't heard from her either.
So where was he expecting her to be? Like, where would she typically be on her day off?
So he was expecting basically that she would have spent the night at maybe her cousin's or her brother's, and he was expecting her to likely have come home
sometime in the morning?
Sometime in the morning.
Okay.
Right.
So she was either with one of them or at home.
Yeah. And so he calls them. She did not spend the night.
And she's not home either.
And she's not home either. Her mother had last communicated with her on Instant Messenger on September 10th. The two had started messaging at around 2:30 p.m. while Sneha was home cleaning her apartment. She expected her cousin to come over for dinner the next day, so she was picking up. And she was also repotting some orchids that had arrived from Hawaii. And then Sneha signed off to go and run some errands. When Ron was finally able to get into their apartment, he found their place was covered in dust from the buildings and that dust had come in through their open window. He said that there were trails of prints from their cats Figga and Callie walking through the dust, but no human footprints and no signs of Sneha. To Ron and her family, the last time someone had communicated with her was the afternoon of September 10th, and they knew something was wrong. Ron was desperately trying to get the word out that she could be missing and that something could have happened to her. He wasn't initially concerned that she had been harmed in the attacks because he thought there wouldn't have been a reason for her to be in those buildings. But when he tried to get someone's attention on this, the world was so focused on the attacks and the thousands of missing and killed that they kind of ignored him. That day, Ron tried to get a reporter's attention to spread the word that Sneha was missing, but once they learned that she had been last seen the day before, they quickly moved on. That's apparently when Ron called his brother-in-law John and told him what was happening. So when John came down and was able to speak to a reporter, he did the only thing he could think of to get Sneha's name out there, and that's he lied and said she had been in the building.
But how would that help him?
I think he was just trying to get her name out there and that she was missing. I don't think he really thought through the repercussions and was just trying to get her name out there.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't make sense now.
It doesn't.
But, like,
there's a lot going on in this guy's life at that moment, so I guess we should give him a break.
Right. Like, New York City is under attack. They all live in New York City.
His sister's missing.
His sister's missing. He just did something that he hoped would make people know that she was like...
Right. He was probably just confused and desperate.
Right. And so in the following days, her family posts flyers for her everywhere. Eventually, John, who was worried that his lie had sent investigators in the wrong direction, recanted his statements and made clear that he had never spoken to her that day. Despite this, systems in New York City were overloaded, which meant her family was left to do their own investigative work, particularly Ron. We've definitely seen families put in this position before, right? Ron finds her IM communications with her mother and realizes that she intended to run errands. She was on the building's security camera leaving the building at around 5:15 p.m. A doorman also reports seeing her leave. She was wearing a brown button-down dress, brown loafers, and had a brown purse. From there, she apparently dropped off dry cleaning. Now, Sneha had left her passport ID and credit cards in their apartment, but she did have Ron's American Express card. Following up on a lead he was able to call and see if there were any charges, and there were, to Century 21, which was a department store directly across from the World Trade Center. Sneha made 2 purchases at Century 21 on September 10th. Now, this was a large department store with 6 stories. It's a big building. And during her time in the store, she was moving around the building. She purchased lingerie, which would have been found on the 3rd floor of the building, and bed linens from the basement level of the building. Those were purchased at 6:05 p.m. Then at 7:18 p.m., she purchased 3 pairs of shoes on the ground floor. In total, she spent $550.
Girl was shopping.
She was. After that, though, the credit card wasn't used, and the doorman didn't report seeing her before he ended his night shift.
So between 7:18 and him ending his shift,
she doesn't come in.
There's nothing.
Yeah, so there's no record of her entering the building that evening. This means that Ron was left to comb through the Century 21 security footage on his own, and according to reports, it took him 3 weeks to go through all their footage.
That must be a lot I mean, I can't imagine how many cameras are in a department store anyways, and then the amount of hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, checks out.
Now, to be clear, the security cameras in the building don't pick up everything, as in they were not everywhere in the store and the angles don't show everything, but it does pick her up on the 5th floor browsing through the coats. Apparently this fits because she had asked for a coat for her birthday, which was coming up in October. The fact that she was last traced there gave her family more information to put on her flyer, and then Ron asked his friends and family to distribute them at other Century 21 branches throughout New York City. Since the store Sneha had visited across from the World Trade Center was obviously closed after the attacks, employees had been moved to other locations. One of those employees, Sonia, had worked in the shoe department and recognized her because she was a regular customer. Sonia contacted the family and said she remembers Sneha being there and that she had been there with a friend. She described this woman as a small woman in her early 30s and possibly, like Sneha, Indian. Unfortunately, the shoe department didn't have a security camera, so confirming this information has never been possible, and no one has come forward to say that they were shopping at Century 21 with her that day. During this process, Ron ended up filing 2 missing persons reports, but because of the timing of her disappearance, she was listed as a potential World Trade Center victim. There was some news coverage of her later that September, and at that point, Ron disagreed with her inclusion on the victim list. He told reporters, "The difference is since she's been missing since Monday, she could potentially be saved. She could be found." Oddly enough, she disappeared right before this happened, right there in front of the World Trade Center. So there was like this sense of urgency on his part that in including her on these lists, the possibility of her being missing for some other reason just wasn't being explored.
Right. It's just really unfortunate timing.
Yes.
Like on any other day, I think people would have listened.
Right. So you have like a young doctor in New York City who's missing.
But there's thousands and thousands of other people missing too.
Yes.
So it's a really, like, it's just very bad timing and like a very odd chance of this happening right there at this time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think at this point in the early investigation in the early days, like that's what he's thinking, that basically like someone could have kidnapped her or harmed her in some way and that no one was looking for her because they're, just including her in, the list of potential 9/11 victims. So at this point, the NYPD is overtaxed. And so her family hires a private investigator, Ken Gallant, who's a former FBI Special Operations agent. Now, he launches his own search for Sneha. He went to her known hangouts, interviewed family, friends, and coworkers, and even brought photos of her down to the ferry docks to see if anyone recognized her and had possibly helped her evacuate from the city. Now, if you remember, or some of our listeners who just might not know this, basically all these boats were coming into New York City and trying to get people evacuated quickly from Manhattan.
I do not remember about the boats.
Yeah, it's like one of the biggest evacuations ever. One clear advantage of hiring someone is that often they can go into a case without any preconceived ideas. So it seemed like Gallant operated under the assumption that anything could have happened to her either on September 10th or after. So he's operating under like a bigger umbrella here. He searched her computer for evidence and found no evidence of her having any affairs or suspicious searches of any sort. He also noted that yes, she had left behind her passport, driver's license, and credit cards, which means that she was only out and about with Ron's Amex. And she had also left behind her glasses.
I think her purchases kind of indicated that she wasn't like going somewhere either.
Yeah, so she had gone shopping.
Yeah.
Right. One thing he did find that Ron hadn't noted yet, that though Ron said he was home alone on the night of September 10th, their home phone had been used around 4 a.m. and that this call was from their home phone to Ron's phone. Ron says that it's possible while half asleep he could have done this to check his messages, but he doesn't have any memories of this.
I feel like we're not suspecting Ron of anything though, since we're using his name.
Yeah,
We're not suspecting him, are we?
No.
Okay.
No. Were you thinking that because it seems strange to you?
Yeah.
The phone call? Yeah.
Well, just like, I mean, honestly, a lot of the time it's the husband.
It is, yeah.
So, That's why.
Yeah, he's not under a cloud of suspicion.
And that's why we get to use his name.
Yes. And although I am keeping his last name out because although it is out there publicly, he also deserves some privacy.
Definitely.
Yeah. The other possible clue that is uncovered is that there is security footage from the lobby of their building that shows that on the morning of September 11th, a woman enters the lobby of the building, lingers by the elevator for just a minute or less before turning and quickly leaving the building. Now, this video, to my knowledge, hasn't been released publicly. What I do know is that apparently, due to the angle of the sun into the building, it's hard to be certain who this person is. But according to the private investigator, the woman's hairstyle is similar. She's wearing similar clothes to those of Sneha, like what she was last seen in, and her mannerisms are the same. The working theory is that Sneha returned to her apartment that morning after Ron had already left for work and entered the lobby. While waiting for the elevator, she heard the first plane hit the North Tower and left the lobby to see what happened. Being so close to the World Trade Center, it would have been clear that the tower had been hit, and Sneha, being a doctor, would have headed towards the tower.
So what her brother said, she said, even though she didn't say that to him, is there possibility?
Yes, so it reopens the possibility that she could have actually, in fact, been there.
Imagine he made that lie and said that she said that, and then that's actually what happened.
Yeah, I mean, that is how kind of the story starts to develop, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, like, because of this sunlight into the lobby, it cannot be confirmed that it was her, which has, of course, led people to believe that it wasn't. They've pointed out that the woman in the video didn't actually have any shopping bags, and wouldn't Sneha have those since she hadn't been back to the apartment after her shopping trip. Like, that was $550 worth of goods.
She had a lot of shoes.
She had a lot of shoes.
They take up space, so
bed
she'd
linens.
have. Yeah.
The time on the video shows her leaving the lobby at 8:43 a.m. and the first plane hits the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. So there's a difference in time. So could she have left the building quickly because she heard the plane hit if there's a 3-minute difference? Now, that's also countered by people saying that it's possible that the camera timing could have been off by a few minutes, which is happened all the time, and particularly in 2001.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even discounting this, though, Sneha's mother remembered that Sneha had mentioned wanting to go to Windows on the World, which was a restaurant on the 106th floor of the North Tower. Someone she knew was getting married there in the spring of 2002, and she had told her mom that she had wanted to go check it out before then. Is it possible, then, that on that Tuesday, one of her days off, that she could have decided to do that morning?
It does seem a little strange, though, that she'd be, like, out all night, either at a cousin's or her brother's, and then get up that early. Like,
yeah, so Ron does say that on days that she spent time out, she did actually return between like 7 and 9.
Right.
So her walking into the lobby
it's not
at that time
completely nuts.
Nor is the possibility that she would have been up early going to Windows on the World. I mean, it seems like she was more like active in the early morning.
The morning girl.
Than maybe either of us.
Yes, I'm not a morning person. So to me, I'm like, wouldn't this be an afternoon thing to do?
Yes.
But not for everybody.
Not for everybody. No. As we've talked about, my kid rises at 5 a.m. so that she can do 5 a.m. yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a magical morning person.
Right. So this seems like, based on what he said, typical for her. Now, on September 22nd, 2001, so just 11 days after the attack, the U.S. government passed Public Law 107-42, which was the Air Transportation Safety and System Stabilization Act. I'm going to use the Act's direct language here. It says, "It is the purpose of this title to provide compensation to any individual or relatives of a deceased individual who is physically injured or killed as a result of the terrorist-related aircraft crashes on September 11th, 2001. And then it lays out all the ways in which the claim could be made and makes clear that those who submit a claim waived their rights to sue for damages. I think one thing that's clear here is that this was done to protect the airlines. Like, that's why it's called the Air Transportation Safety and System Stabilization Act, and it wasn't really named something specifically about supporting victims or families, right? It's that big clause in there about not suing.
Right, but would people have sued?
Yes, I think so.
For what part, though? Like,
basically, you could
like
have
a security issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, this wasn't the only compensation fund. There was also New York's September 11th Fund, and then there was a whole bunch of private funds that were done to help victims.
Mm-hmm.
By this point, I think her family largely believed that, yes, Sneha had been a victim of 9/11. So in October of 2002, Ron filed a claim with the Victim Compensation Fund. The compensation fund based the payout amounts on basically potential earnings lost. So taking just, say, the two towers, you have businesses like Cantor Fitzgerald, Morgan Stanley, Xerox. And if you think of the wages of those individuals, like particularly the higher ups, right? We're talking about massive payouts. I mean, I think it's one of the worst moments of capitalism to determine someone's worth by their job, but that's what they went with. An attorney who represented other families during the compensation process says that he estimated that a claim for Sneha would have been valued at somewhere between $3 to $4 million. Around this point, the NYPD starts to investigate Sneha's disappearance finally. Remember, it took them a while because of how overloaded they were in the wake of 9/11. And what they found basically transformed Sneha's disappearance from a hero's story into one that still fuels massive Reddit posts to this day.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, South Pool, read by Sakina Jaffrey. Sakina can currently be seen on the Showtime series Billions and the TNT drama Snowpiercer, where she plays scientist Mrs. Hedwood. She can also be seen on Apple's limited series Defending Jacob, where she plays District Attorney Lynn Canavan. She was a series regular on the NBC series Timeless, playing the role of Agent Denise Christopher. Sakina starred as White House Chief of Staff Linda Vasquez in the Netflix series House of Cards. She has recurred on Little Voice and can also be seen as Captain Willa Kamal on Lost in Space for Netflix, as Mama G in Neil Gaiman's American Gods for Starz, and as Dr. Meyer on Homeland for Showtime. Recent films include Red Sparrow, The Meyerowitz Stories, and Equalizer 2. One of her greatest hits includes her role as Nilma, Kate Hudson's bat-wielding neighbor in Garry Marshall's Raising Helen.
South Pool, Panel S66. Sneha Philip, 31, missing since September 10, 2001, from Manhattan, New York. My professor asks, "How do you write a 9/11 story?" And the room fills with our anxious shifting. "It's impossible," someone finally says, while we all think of the bodies, the way we didn't expect to see them fall from the sky, the way we heard plane and thought propeller, a light-bodied aircraft surely, until the screens of our televisions showed us differently. My professor asked, "How do you write a 9/11 story?" And now, I know he wanted us to think of the impossibility of it, but I think he never considered how it isn't in the enormous weight of each plane, but in the bluebird sky morning before white sheets of paper spiraled through the sky. The way the streets filled with chirping, not of birds, but of pass devices, each alert designed to warn of a firefighter down, so they could be rescued by their brothers and sisters. But Sneha, there were too many that day to save them all, and there were no mechanisms to mark your path, no resounding chirp to indicate you'd stop moving in that silty dark. And now, I think I don't know, once again, how to tell a 9/11 story without you in it. Even though I can't place you on the street, detect from what angle you saw fire billow through the skies, or measure how many milliseconds it took for the sound of the towers starting to fall to reach the curve of your ear. I will never know if you held another hand in yours or whispered to a stranger that they would be okay. But I can still see you there, moving forward. Moving forward.
For more information about our show or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.